This has been a much more difficult time, I believe. The purpose of reflecting on Yom HaShoah is to never forget the Holocaust. But we also are raising awareness about supporting Israel and standing against genocide and understanding the danger of remaining silent and motivating people to pray for America and for Israel and for the world. Faith has to look like something. It just can't be in a vacuum. It has to cause us to do something. As I consider what's happening in the world today, I add that we cannot be political when it comes to good and evil. We've got to seek God's discernment in order to know which is which, because everybody thinks what they're doing is good. But we have to choose a side, not because of any reason except that there's good and there's evil. So you might be asking, am I talking about the Gaza-Israel war? There's good and there's evil? The answer is yes. Though we pray and care for every person, and we suffer when we think about the children who are being hurt, we still have to understand that there's a reason that this war is going on. And Hamas, I would say, is evil because it does not want peace. It wants to destroy Israel. And Israel is good because it wants peace and it wants to live side by side with those in Gaza. How's that for simplicity? Is Israel perfectly good? Absolutely not. Are the people of Gaza all bad? Absolutely not. But we have to understand. And to help us understand, well, let me give you a couple examples. Here's an example I heard on the radio coming to the synagogue this evening. And I quickly Googled it and found it. So Taher Hezbollah, a member of the American Muslims for Palestine, claimed anybody who has a relationship, this is a quote, anybody who has a relationship with or any support or identifies themselves as a Jewish person or as a Christian Zionist, then we shall not be their friend. I will tell you that they are enemy number one, and our community needs to recognize that as such. This is the kind of hatred that we cannot be an example of. No matter what happens, we cannot behave like that. We cannot speak like that. And we have to be very careful because they're passionate and we're passionate. But we still have no excuse to speak like that. And really no excuse to think like that. Now I'd like you to watch a video, it's a short video, and this video will kind of put together what's happened in the past month or so here in the United States, along with what happened in 1939 in Germany. If we can run it.
There is only one solution. Intifada revolution.
We have to talk about this. Jewish students across American campuses, particularly at places like Columbia University, are facing a chilling reality that mirrors the dark times of Europe when the Nazis rose to power. Here's the truth that no one wants to talk about. Protesters screaming about justice and rights. probably don't even know what they're protesting about.
And what would you say is the main goal with tonight's protest?
I think the goal is just showing our support for Palestine and demanding that NYU stops. I honestly don't know all of what NYU's doing.
Is there something that NYU's doing?
I really don't know. I'm pretty sure do you know what NYU's doing?
No, I'm serious. Ask them to point out Israel on the map and you'll see blank stares. 99% of them probably can't even point to Israel on the map. Now, let's talk about discrimination. It's the 1930s all over again. But instead of Jews being marked in Europe, they're being singled out at universities in the United States of America. 1938, University of Vienna. Jewish students were barred from entering university grounds, and their right to education was brutally stripped away under Nazi policy. Today, in the United States, at Columbia University, Jewish students face physical assaults and exclusion, forcibly removed from campus spaces by anti-Semitic mobs, mirroring the exclusion once seen in Vienna. Kristallnacht, 1938, known as the Night of Broken Glass, this pogrom saw the destruction of Jewish storefronts, synagogues, and homes across Germany. Columbia University today, the smashing of glasses and doors only because there are Jewish students on campus. And no, don't get me started on the lie that it's about Israel and not about the Jews. Here's a Jewish student that has nothing to do with Israel who is blocked and not allowed to enter the university he paid to study at only because he's Jewish. They prove to everybody that their problem is with the Jews. Israel is just an excuse. Nazi Germany, early 1930s. Jews were increasingly attacked by armed SA paramilitaries, often with little to no police intervention. UCLA today, a Jewish man is attacked with a taser by anti-Israel protesters and nearby police do not intervene. This is a really bad throwback to the lawlessness Jews faced under Nazi rule. Nazi checkpoints, 30s to 40s. Jews were frequently stopped and their movements were restricted within cities. They were forced to move into fenced ghettos and were later sent to concentration camps. UCLA today, again, Jewish students face checkpoints set up by radical students, interrogated about their Zionist beliefs, just like the oppressive tactics in Nazi Germany. Nazi propaganda. The spread of anti-Semitic propaganda was the key tool for the Nazis. And today at George Washington University, a student displays a final solution sign at a protest, a horrifying nod to the Nazi genocide plans against Jews. They don't even hide their true colors anymore. Academic exclusions in Nazi Germany. Jewish academics were some of the first dismissed from their positions under Nazi policies. Today, a Jewish professor was barred from entering the university where he teaches only because he's Jewish and supposedly only for his safety. Are you kidding me? So instead of dispersing the violent protests in campus, they take action against a Jewish professor that poses no threat to anyone? Nazi public symbols. During the Nazi era, symbols like the swastika were not just emblems of the Nazi party, but became tools of terror, prominently displayed to spread fear and promote the party's genocidal ideology against Jews and other groups. Stanford University today, a student proudly wears a Hamas headband on campus, normalizing a symbol of violence and terrorism. This is a group, keep in mind, that mere months ago executed ruthlessly civilians in their bedrooms only because they were Jews. 1,200 in number. How can this be allowed on campuses? Just as Nazi swastikas were paraded in Nazi Germany, today in New York City, Hezbollah flags are embraced by protesters, signaling a disturbing comfort with terrorist symbols in public spaces. This is a very confused generation. A generation that abuses the freedom their grandparents fought for. A generation that takes peace for granted and therefore looks for action. War is bad. It should not be celebrated. The parallels are clear and deeply troubling. The tactics of intimidation, exclusions, and violence that were used as tools of Nazi oppression against Jews are being mirrored in the actions of some protesters on today's campuses. I have to point out that unlike Nazi Germany, what's happening on campuses is not a systematic policy against Jews, but rather lack of policy against rioters who target Jews. Jews must be safe wherever they are, just like any other group has to be safe wherever they are. Don't be indifferent. Jews are 0.2% of the world's population. Anti-Semitism is not a Jewish problem. It's a humanity problem that we all have to unite against.
Okay. So that gives you a little overview, and maybe you get a sense of what's going on between now and what happened back in Germany. Let me just mention one thing about the war having to do with Israel. You know, Israel is ready to go into Rafah, but whenever they've gone anywhere in Gaza they have dropped leaflets in Arabic so that the people, and they're told in those leaflets, leave this area because we're going to come after Hamas, and so that you won't get hurt. But unfortunately, Hamas doesn't let them leave because they know that if they use the people as a shield, then the world will come against Israel, even though it's Hamas using the world, the people as a shield. But what country sends leaflets first and says, we're about to attack in this area, please evacuate? But that's the heart of Israel. And that was certainly not the heart of Germany during the Holocaust. The Holocaust actually is taken from the burnt sacrifice that was offered in the temple, and that was totally consumed. And, you know, as we know it now, it's the slaughter of 6 million Jews by Hitler and the Nazis in World War II. Jews refer to it as Shoah, meaning terrible catastrophe or tempest. The actual day of commemoration was on this past Monday. More than ever before, there were people around the world who not only said that there has never been a Holocaust, they're called Holocaust deniers, they also say that about October 7th, that it never happened. And it's hard to believe because everybody has a phone camera, and so far they've collected over 2,000 videos of what happened that day. There are three main themes: never forget, never again, and never be silent. But today we have to change one of those themes, because never again is now. The Holocaust began really in 1939, but it was made possible in 1933 when Hitler came to power. And besides Jewish people, they came against gypsies, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, and the disabled. And altogether, about 11 million people died. The Nazis used the word final solution. We saw it in the video. That refers to the plan to murder and get rid of every single Jew alive. And that's why that sign is so difficult to look at. This is a spiritual battle, which must be fought first with prayer, and then we must put feet to prayer. Jeremiah 31, verses 34 and 35, thus says Adonai, who gives the sun as a light by day, and the fixed order of the moon and the stars as a light by night, who stirs up the sea so its waves roar. Adonai Tzivaot is his name. Only if this fixed order departs from me, before me, it is a declaration of Adonai. Then also might Israel's offspring cease from being a nation before me for all time. Meaning that as long as you see the sun, the moon, and the stars, Israel is a nation before God. And Hasatan wants to prove God a liar, so he wants the Jews to be gotten rid of from the earth, and that's why anti-Semitism continues. It's a spiritual battle. And we know from Ephesians 6:12, our struggle's not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of darkness, and against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. When you think about the Holocaust, think of it this way. If you were a Jew who lived in Europe, 2 out of every 3 people you know died. You got that? So if you knew 10 people, really, or make it easier on me, 12 people, then 6, thank you. No, 9 people. If you knew 12 Jews, 9 of them died in the Holocaust. Just think about it. Roughly 2/3 of all Jews died. The Nazis also killed in that number was an estimated 1.1 million children. Now, in 1933, when Hitler came in, he immediately instigated a boycott of all Jewish businesses. To bring this closer to home, do you understand the importance and the horror that Jewish people feel when it comes to cancel culture? Simply put, cancel culture is the idea that if you have a different opinion, you get canceled. In other words, you get boycotted, or your reputation is hurt. That's what cancel culture is, and it's right out of Hitler's playbook. We see this now not only in business, but we see it on college campuses. They don't allow conservative speakers to speak. College campuses were supposed to be the place where freedom rings, where everybody gets a voice. That's not true anymore. They don't allow people with different ideas to come. And it's not all the kids, but when you have a group of kids that are so disruptive, it kind of speaks for all the kids. And it's very rare, if you notice, that the good college students who love the United States, who love it, very few get up and have their own march. There'd be thousands and thousands of them if they got up, but they don't. We saw in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, that some of the kids, it wasn't a large group, they took down the flag that was hoisted up from Gaza, and they put up the American flag. And they sang the Star-Spangled Banner. But that's rare. That's rare. And it shouldn't be. Then there were the Nuremberg laws, which stripped the Jews of citizenship, prohibited marriages it had to only be done within the Jewish community, and they wouldn't allow Jews to date or really be in relationship with Germans who weren't Jewish. Later on, they weren't allowed in parks. They got fired from their civil service jobs. They had to register their property. Even their doctors could only work on Jewish patients. There was Kristallnacht, which is the Night of Broken Glass, where just businesses and synagogues were looted, and 30,000 Jews were arrested in those 2 nights, sent to concentration camps. In 1939, the Nazis began this whole Holocaust thing, and they also began in 1939 that Jews had to wear these yellow stars. And we have a funny story about yellow stars in our family. My mom, who I guess was extremely pretty when she was very young. I mean, she was pretty when she was older too, but very pretty when she was young, but somewhat rebellious. And she decided not to wear the yellow star. And a couple of soldiers, German soldiers, stopped her and said, "Aren't you Jewish?" And she said yes. And they said, "Well, you know, you aren't wearing the stars." And so she said, "Oh, please let me go." And and they did. And they let her go. And just one of those interesting stories we get to hear. Another interesting story was one by Jermaine Pitchen. Jermaine passed away a few years ago, lived in Clearwater. She was actually born in Greece, and she was in the Holocaust, and we're going to watch a video in a second of her. But I had the pleasure of joining her son, Saul Pitchen, who also has passed away just a couple years ago. We led his mom to the Lord together. And so I want you to hear the story. So why don't we play the video?
My mother survived the Holocaust, World War II. God has me serving him in the Holocaust of abortion here in America today.
Saul Pitchen has a heritage of survival. That heritage began in Nazi Germany, as Hitler's directive of the final solution was being carried out to eliminate the so-called Jewish problem: extermination.
My name is Jermaine Pitchen. I'm a Holocaust survivor.
In 1942, when she was a teenager, Saul's mother Jermaine and her Jewish family were forcibly rounded up and put on a train headed for Auschwitz. After traveling without food and water for 8 days, the crowded boxcar arrived at the infamous concentration camp.
She got off the train. The Nazis took her mother and 5 sisters in that direction and to the gas chambers that day, and she went to Block 10, which was an experimental block.
I was scared.
There was about 300 young girls, young ladies, and what they did is they sterilized them, gave them shock treatments. So there was my mother, right around 16 years old, finding herself on the operating table. And here the Nazi doctor, Dr. Mengele, he personally operated on her, removed one of her ovaries, ready to remove the other one.
Saul says what happened next was a miracle.
The Allied forces started bombing. And so the Nazi doctor, along with the soldiers, ran for cover. And that doctor instructed the imprisoned Jewish doctor to finish her up, said, remove the other ovary. And so he told her, he says, young lady, I've got to make an incision, but I'm not going to remove that organ. Yet I want you to do 2 things. One, I want you to hide your cycle each month. And secondly, remember me when you have children.
If his boy give my son Shalom Samuel, it's a promise.
Jermaine kept her promise and did. Years later, Saul became her firstborn. He believes his mother's life was spared, so one day he could help spare the lives of others.
They were an unwanted people. Those unwanted people today are the unborn. Because of what my mother went through, she fought to live. That baby is fighting to live. If we don't take a stand and intervene as Christians, who will?
He's now a guardian for the unborn. As president and CEO of New Life Solutions, Saul and his staff provide support for women to carry their unplanned pregnancies to birth.
We got to continue to be the voice for those who don't have a voice. Here in the Tampa Bay area, 1 out of every 3 babies is being aborted. You know, the ultimate injustice is to be deprived of life.
The Pregnancy Center of Pinellas County provides free pregnancy tests, sonograms, ultrasounds, and a birth center, the first of its kind nationally, staffed by certified nurse midwives. They also initiate ministry in the moment of crisis.
They come in fearful, and they needed a ministry, an organization like ours that they could come to and see that they could have a support system that's right here to help them choose what's healthy, what's right, what is godly.
Jennifer and Phil Petrini needed reassurance about their pregnancy. They met with the staff to make a thoughtful and informed decision about.
My mother survived the Holocaust, World War II.
I want to keep on target here, and that's getting into the abortion thing, which is important, and that's why we give money to that organization. And Saul, just a very dear friend of my family and myself. It's where Sarah, my other daughter, works, does ultrasounds there. Any rate, but I just want to give you some sense of this. Let me just mention a couple people quickly. If you've never seen the movie Schindler's List, go see it. Take a lot of tissues, but go see it. Schindler, who was a Nazi and a businessman in Germany, ended up saving 1,200 Jewish lives. And it's an amazing story. And he's considered one of the righteous Gentiles. At Yad Vashem, which is the Holocaust Museum in Israel, over 28,000 non-Jewish people have been identified and honored for what they have done through the years. And it's called the Righteous Among the Nations. Another example of righteous is Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He was a German pastor. He wrote in 1940, if you can imagine, he published a prayer book, and he explained the importance of the Hebrew Scriptures to Christianity. And it was a real rebuke of the Nazi efforts to undermine Jewish things. And he further said that Christianity was unavoidably Jewish, that the Old Testament is not superseded by the New, but is inextricably linked with it, and that Jesus was unavoidably Jewish. Unfortunately, he died in a concentration camp just a few weeks before it was liberated. And if you want to read a fantastic book by Eric Metaxas, it's called Bonhoeffer, all 600 pages. But it will give you an education incredible. You know, Martin Luther is another historical figure, obviously, that people know him because he started the Protestant Reformation, revolution, really. And he said in the beginning of his ministry, Jews are blood relations of our Lord. If it were proper to boast of flesh and blood, the Jews belong more to Christ than we. I beg, therefore, my dear papist, if you become tired of abusing me as a heretic, that you begin to revile me as a Jew. Pretty strong. Unfortunately, at the end of his life, he turned the exact opposite. And he was actually quoted by Hitler in terms of some of the reasons to go after the Jews. He said, this is just a little part. What shall we Christians do with this rejected and condemned people, the Jews? Since they live among us, we dare not tolerate their conduct now that we are aware of their lying and reviling and blaspheming. If we do, we become sharers of their lies, cursing and blasphemy. Thus we cannot extinguish the unquenchable fire of divine wrath of which the prophets speak, nor can we convert the Jews. So I'll give you some sincere advice very quickly. Number one, set fire to the synagogues and schools. 2, their houses should be destroyed by fire as well. 3, their prayer books and the Talmud writings and so on should be destroyed. Number 4, rabbis should be forbidden to teach on pain of loss of life and limb. 5th, I advise safe conduct on the highways be abolished completely for the Jews. 6, I advise that usury be prohibited to them and that all cash and treasure of silver and gold be taken from them. So, gives you a little sense of that. I'd like to close, though, with somebody who did the opposite. Initially, he was pro-Nazi, and then he changed and became part of what was called the Confessing Church, which was what Bonhoeffer belonged to. And Martin Niemöller said, and I'd like you to read this with me. He was a pastor, and he spent 8.5 years in concentration camp. So join with me. First, they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionist, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. So how do we respond from all of this? I mean, we could talk for hours and hours about this. But I think, you know, we saw the Edmund Burke quote already about, so let's go to the Elie Wiesel group quote, for the dead and the living, we must bear witness. And James 2:14 says, and verses 26, those two verses, what does it profit, my brethren, if someone says has faith but does not have works? For as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead also. So in closing, I'm going to have Becca come up in a second, but in closing to this, let me just say, what can we do? Very simply, number one, letters, emails, phone calls to the president, to the Congress, to the people who you know, whatever you can do, flood them with what the direction they should go. Number two, get involved with school boards, public school boards, civic boards, politics, stuff like that. Number three, give of finances to groups that are doing these kinds of things. And number four, pray without ceasing. Beck?
So, as we talk about, as Rabbi just spoke about our plan of action, those things are very doable. We can speak to these people, we can write letters, we can make phone calls. But I want to bring up a side of it that maybe we don't always process. And I want to have you consider the reality of what we're talking about and what this means and what it can mean for the future. And let me explain myself really quickly. I want you to understand that this is something that is personal, meaning those things, if we stand for Israel, we as Jews and as Gentiles who support and love the Jewish people, if we are doing this stand, it is going to affect us. It's going to affect us in one way, shape, or form. Whether if it's the universities, maybe we attend, or we have a family member who attends, or maybe it's at our job where somebody's putting pressure or doing something maybe anti-Semitic or something even towards another coworker or towards yourself. I'm telling you that this is going to get more personal. And so it's going to be more of a question of where do I stand? Like when I go into the synagogue, it's easy to be here. We're amongst fellow people who all believe and feel the same way we do. When we go out into the streets and we go out into our businesses or maybe even into our families or into different churches, or you don't know where it will be, but you might be the only person in that moment in time who's willing to either say, I'm Jewish or I'm standing with the Jews. Are you willing to do it? Will you be able to do it? And I'm asking myself the same question, and I think it's a good question to raise this time because just as we've spoken in the past, just that quote, you know, It's easy to sit back and just kind of watch things happen, watch it happen on the news, pray for Israel from a distance. But when it affects you personally, what are you going to do? And I think this is an important question to raise right now. Because although currently we're still kind of watching it for the most part on the news, it's only a matter of time before we are part of the news. Do you follow me? So I just thought it would be a powerful thing to do. I would like each one of you to just ask yourself. And lastly, I'll just say one other thing. You know, Peter, who was an apostle of Yeshua, he, said, God, I would never deny you, And, God, Yeshua basically said, well, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And so I just bring that up because we're all human and we're all fallible, but I also bring it up as a point of wisdom of how, let's look at our hearts. Let's look at, if we were the only person who had to stand up, could you? And if it affected our comforts. Anyway, I just want to end with this. I want to give each of us an opportunity to do something this evening that would be meaningful to our own personal hearts. If you want to say, I am going to stand with the nation of Israel, I'm going to stand with the Jewish people, I am Jewish and I'm not going to hide from it, any of those categories, you see myself, Rabbi, wearing these Jewish stars. I'm going to give each one of you who wants one to come forward, and I really feel like I want it to mean something to you, that you look at that and you say, this is who I am, this is what I'm standing for. Whether I'm Jewish or whether I'm a supporter of the Jewish people, take a star, bring it with you, put it on your shirt if you want. I mean, you can do whatever you want with it, but put it in your house, put it in your car, put it somewhere so that it will be a constant reminder to you in these days that may get darker, we know they will get darker, of what you're committed to do. So at this time, if anybody would like to come forward and get a star, I'm giving them out.
Father, as people come up, Lord, I pray in the name of Yeshua that we will not be embarrassed about you. We will not be embarrassed about Israel. We will not be embarrassed about your people, your land. We will not be embarrassed by your word, but that we will be bold. And though we will have the fruit of your spirit, and so we will do things in a loving manner, but we will still stand for the truth. We will not back down. Lord, this is a difficult thing for us. None of us want to be embarrassed. None of us want to be made to feel small. But yet, Lord, you ask whether or not we are willing to stand up for the truth. So, Father, I pray in the name of Yeshua that you would help us in every regard. Help us, O Lord, so that we will have the guts to wear a shirt, whether it's a sharing shirt or a Israel shirt or something with Hebrew or the star or something where people will be able to react. Lord, I just pray that we will make a difference. Lord, help us to not just stand and watch what's going on in our country. Lord, let us be world changers. Let us be people who are willing to change this country for you, Lord, bringing you back into the public square. We love you in the name of Yeshua. Amen.